You've heard of the fallen angels, right? Lucifer and the boys cast out of heaven. But the question is, where were they cast out to? Could it be that the UFO phenomena has its roots in a much older and darker struggle? Let's enter the world of things visible and invisible. Ali Siadatan is the founder of thinkagainproductions.com in Canada, a multimedia teaching ministry shedding light on mysteries and treasures of scriptural knowledge which claims to make the Bible more real than ever, but maybe a bit too real. As part of his ministry, claims to have found evidence in the Bible that points to such things as alien abductions and the prophetic events they portend. And he joins me down the line from his home in Toronto, Canada. Ali, welcome to Things Visible and Invisible.
Thank you so much for having me, Sean. Glad to be here.
Ali, thank you so much for taking part in this. You have a very, very interesting backstory I was reading about. Originally from Iran, I believe, and something happened there driving out of Tehran one night, which I think it would be fair to say changed your life, no?
Yeah, definitely changed the trajectory of my professional life and had a major influence on it. I was gone to visit my dad in the December of 1999, and we were driving to Isfahan, which is about 6 hours south of Tehran, and we were driving ultimately to Shiraz, which is 11 hours south. And the roads, people don't really follow the rules of the road. It's one of the places in the world where there's the most amount of car accidents. People drive like it's the German Autobahn. And so my dad preferred to, travel late at night. He said it was just the roads were much safer because there was nobody on them. So this was well past midnight. I don't know, it was 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, somewhere around there. And we were going to sleep over in Isfahan and then the next morning continue to Shiraz. And so there was just the odd car driving by, little pit stops, which are more like villages with a restaurant and gas station, and just the night sky. And so there's long trenches of the road where it's just us. And so I had my back to the passenger door speaking to him and his wife. He was sitting in the middle of the back seat, kind of his hands over the front seats talking to us. And my dad's wife was driving. And I was so caught up in what I was saying, as usually I am. And she pointed out the window behind me and she started to make these sounds like, and I didn't pay attention, didn't notice, I was caught up. And he then looked at her and said, "What's wrong, Nima?" And he looked in the same direction that she was pointing to, and he started to do the same thing. And he started to point and start making the same noises. Now they're both doing it. And I was like, what's wrong with you guys? So I just sat straight in my seat to look ahead, and there was this giant spherical object. It was close enough. It was maybe, still a few 100 feet away, but it was close enough and it was big enough. It was maybe 3-4 stories high if you were a low rise, that I could see structure. I could see division around it. I don't know, maybe it was window. I don't know what it was, but I could see division. And then I could see green lights all around it. There was small green lights. And as a result, it had a pulsating green aura around it. It was pulsating green as it was slowly coming down. And it was on an angle of descent. And so I said to myself, this is a helicopter. Then I thought, no, this is not a helicopter. And I just kind of taking it in, the enormity of it, and slowly coming down. And now it's perpendicular to us. And out of the ground came a giant tube. I know this is a very strange story, but out of the ground came a giant tube. And it was black, like the darkness of the desert night. If we were not that close to it, we wouldn't see in the tube, the cylinder. It was just like, it was like camouflaged. And this thing came on right on top of it. And the moment it was on top of the cylinder, like a blink of an eye, went into the ground. And then she blurted out, "This is a sign from God to show us that all that Ali is saying is true." We were having a deep conversation about spirituality and about things actually biblical, because the Bible is banned in Iran, and they were curious to learn about it. And then she's like, "Did you see that?" And he's like, "I did." And I just kind of sank quietly in my seat thinking, I couldn't believe it. I mean, I was in a state of shock. And so we drove to Isfahan. The next morning we woke up and I was sitting at the breakfast table and I thought, is anyone going to bring it up? And they didn't. And then when I came back to Toronto, I started to look into it in a more serious way. Of course, everyone has heard about UFOs, but never really, thought too much about it in a profound way. And that led to the making of a documentary called UFOs, Angels, and Gods that went viral worldwide. And that, of course, changed my life as well. Perhaps even brought me to speaking to you, Sean. And then as I was making that documentary, my dad called me and we were having a conversation and he said, "What are you up to?" And I said, "I'm making a documentary on UFOs." And he didn't say anything. So I said, "Dad, do you remember?" And then he blurted out, "That green thing on the road to Isfahan." And I said, "Yes." And that's when I realized for the first time that he had seen a green thing as well. And he was keeping it in, the way he blurted out. But that's the story of my sighting, yeah.
Well, it's absolutely fascinating, and I want to unpack it, and I want to also discuss with you the impact it's had on your life. But let's backtrack a little bit, because we've sort of dropped our audience straight into the mise en scene, as the French would say. Who was Ali prior to that? I mean, how old were you when this incident occurred?
So I was around 27 years old.
Okay. So, and you had been through education, you were working, I guess, living in Tehran?
No, I was living in Canada and had gone back to visit him for the Christmas holidays in December of 1999. Okay. I had 2 weeks and I had gone to see him then.
So what year did this take place then?
Sorry?
What year did this sighting take place?
In December of 1999.
December 1999. So probably the last thing you were expecting? Yes,
absolutely.
Now,
it was a shock.
Now, nobody's talking about it, but how did you process it? Do you know what I mean? Like, how did you rationalize it? Did you think, I saw something or I didn't see something? Obviously, you knew about UFOs. Did you immediately start to research UFOs, look into the whole phenomenon?
Yeah, it was hard to think that you didn't see something because it was so close.
Right.
It was so filled with details, like the structure. It was close enough to see it. And then it took some time. Like, it didn't just disappear for, it wasn't a blink of an eye moment incident. It came down, it went on the cylinder, it went on the ground. I saw it. So it was like, something that, you saw something real. I mean, I remember the details. Like, I can see myself in the car. I'm seeing right now the black sky. As I'm telling you this story, I can see my dad's wife and what she was wearing and what he was, things you don't usually remember with the passage of time about your memories. But this really, marked me. So when I came back, I went on a website, I think it was called UFO Research and .com or .net or whatever it was. And it had a section where people would put in their sightings. And it was divided by jurisdiction. So I went into Ontario, the province where I live, and I saw that all these people around here were seeing these things, and they're describing objects and dimensions and shapes. And for the first time, I actually could believe them. And I was like, wow, I'm one of these people now. And so I typed in what I saw, and it was kind of therapeutic. Mm. And then I realized there was a stigma around the culture that you couldn't talk about it. It wasn't an easy thing to talk about. It was kind of like crazy. It was different. I mean, this was 26 years ago. The culture had a peak about these things in the 60s, but starting in the early 70s, it had gone underground because Professor Condon said that it was all just swamp gas. And that became the official position of the media and the government. So now it's having a renaissance. But in the late 90s, it was kind of like you were kind of crazy. And so I felt the pressure, the pure pressure of that I couldn't really talk about it. But how did it change me? Where did it take me? Well, I was at this point a Christian. I was studying the Bible. I'd had a profound spiritual experience. The Islamic Revolution in Iran in 1979 had kind of thrown me on a spiritual quest because religion was kind of shoved down everyone's throats. So you suddenly were confronted with these ideas you may have not thought about, like, is there a God? Who are these prophets? What's going on? And it had catapulted me into a lifelong spiritual quest that led me eventually to have a profound spiritual experience with God through the gospel. So I realized, okay, this works. This formula is real, and that led me to want to actually read the book from where it came, to understand the backbone and where it came from. And one thing I hadn't looked into was the topic of angels, because that wasn't a concern. I had heard, I once asked somebody, somebody had opened my eyes to said, maybe there's a relationship between the angel and the Bible, and these ancient, sightings, that the ancient astronaut theory, and modern UFOs even, and the von Däniken chariot of the gods type of thing. Actually, as I said, well, what should I read? He said, "Oh, read von Däniken's chariot of the gods." And so it was in the back of my mind, but never wasn't an area of interest I was going to run to. Now, the idea of connecting these things together wasn't really a priority, but now it suddenly became a priority because I think I believed the UFO phenomenon was real at that point. There was something to research. So first I took the deep dive into all the empirical research that ufologists had gathered. The history of ufology, it has a real history. There's actually Ivy League professors who've dedicated their lives to recording this stuff, and they don't have a bias. They're just like starting with J. Allen Hynek. And eventually I met Dr. David Jacobs, who I interviewed twice now. And then I started to pay attention to these ancient writings, and the ancient astronaut theory was very interesting because it brought the ancient gods to life, but clothed them with the clothing of aliens, which is a Darwinian idea, because we live in the scientific age, and we live after the age of enlightenment in the scientific age, and we tend to want to understand everything through this. We gather data and facts, and then we research it, and then we come to conclusions. And so the Darwin's creation story, which is kind of the creation story of the atheist, it clothed this phenomenon with an explanation. We evolved here, and in the vastness of the galaxies, they evolved elsewhere. And now they're coming to visit us. Now we have to figure out why, and maybe we can research whatever data we can collect. And the ancient astronaut theorists have their own, explanations, especially Zacharias Sitchin, who has an entire explanation. But for me, coming from this Christianity and this nascent faith and this biblical vision of life, where I was trying to now understand history all anew through a new paradigm, and understand, the archaeology, were these ancient cities real, Babylon, etc. And how does the Bible understand the trajectory of human civilization and human history? How did it lead to this moment in time? It provides its own explanation of human history and the rise and fall of empires and Israel in the midst of it all. And now I noticed that it had this meta dimension, which was the angelic dimension. And in Christian cultures, angels are reduced to birded winged creatures that intervene in people's lives in key moments, or bring some nice messages, or maybe visit some prophets, or visit Mother Mary to tell her about baby Jesus. That kind of a fairy tale, childlike, quaint little thing of way of seeing things. And on the other hand, we have the great scientific age with its telescopes, and starting with Galileo, that peer into the vastness of the skies and tell us the mysteries of the heavens. And so this is kind of the cultural understanding of things. But when you actually look into the text, first of all, the role of angels, and man is born. There's the host of the heavens and the host of the earth, and we are in a cosmic tale of galactic proportions unfolding we are intelligent beings, not like the dolphins or the monkeys. We have the knowledge to decipher the DNA and break the atom and travel like Elon Musk, into the heavens. Why? Because we're of the world of God and angels, and this is the kind of world it is. It's not a childish world. And so the biblical account of angels, I realize, is very different from the cultural account of angels. And I now know where we got the cultural account, the fairy tale version. So in the Bible, I noticed like the famous chariot of Elijah, the chariot of fiery chariot of Elijah, Rechevesh in Hebrew, the fiery chariot of Elijah that takes him up into the heavens, or the wheels of Ezekiel, or even the chariots of God that are here at Sinai, or the fact that there's a return with his chariots. It says God will come with his chariots in the scroll of Isaiah, speaking of what Christians call the second coming. It's a there's a legion of angels. There's wars happening. In the documentary, I have this footage from Columbia shuttle, a camera put on the Columbia shuttle to randomly film space, and it catches this object outside of the atmosphere, and another one appears, and then it shoots at it. There's something comes at it, like a laser or something, and the object that's in front zooms away, and it just misses it. This type of the war of angels and the whole concept that the gods of the ancient world are mentioned in the Bible as though they're real beings, like we're talking Zeus and Jupiter and Apollo and Shams and the gods of India. These are mentioned. In fact, one of the titles of God is the God of gods. And so I realized that, wait a second, there is this other that is mentioned here, and it's intertwined with giving the codes of civilization, knowledge. That's what the libraries of Mesopotamia talk about, knowledge received from the gods. And that the angels are seen more as creatures that operate within the laws of the creation, utilize it as we do, but they know more of it. And they do have these vehicles, which have been translated as chariots, because until recently, that was the only English word to convey vehicles. So the translators just translated as chariot, because what else that was a vehicle. But in the Hebrew, it literally says vehicle, something that carries you from A to B. So my idea of the world of angels first was transformed because of the empirical evidence of UFOs. It demythologized all of this aspect of the Bible and brought it out of the realm of mythology into the realm of reality. And then the study of the text provided a narrative that gave me an explanation of this phenomenon. And the empirical data kept matching, what I was reading, even into very, unlikely and absurd things such as alien abductions and the creation of hybrids. Even these things existed in the Bible. So suddenly one brought the other out of the realm of mythology, and the other provided a key to understand it.
Yes. I mean, I'm just wondering though, Ali, I mean, you have gone on a not an absolutely peculiar trajectory, but it's an unusual one, because you're probably aware that a lot of people who, and you must have encountered them, who have what they would claim to be sort of UFO experiences, go in the opposite direction. They go off into all sorts of weird and wonderful sort of neo-Gnostic ideas around alien beings and ETs and other messiahs and all the rest of it. Whereas you seem to have immediately begun to understand it through a Christian lens, which again is unusual.
Yes.
Are you of the school which some Christians hold, not all, but some, that UFOs and everything pertaining to them are basically demonic forces?
Right. So the one of the big discoveries that I made, to answer your question first, I believe that it is the physical manifestation of the world of God and angels. Period. The whole enchilada. The good, bad, and the ugly. But the key to discovering that was the word Elohim, which was a word that my research led me to. Perhaps God led me to it, most certainly, because it was a profound discovery. I realized that in the Old Testament, there was a tremendous amount of vocabulary that talked about these beings. But in the New Testament, in the Christian tradition, they all had been flattened to one word: angels, angelus, messenger. So in the Old Testament, the word that is used, Elohim, and these are called the chariots of Elohim, the Rechev Elohim, is a word that is used for what Christians would call angels at large, good and bad. So they both have it. That's how the Bible's vocabulary, first of all, describes it. So whether it's the angel that took Elijah up, or Enoch up, or destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, or rolled the tomb of Jesus and sat on it, these beings also utilize, and if he comes back with an armada of angels, as the Lord of hosts, to do battle with the ones that are here and who are technologically preparing us. So first of all, this was a revelation concerning the angelic world, period. The nature of the angelic world transformed before my eyes from being something that is fairy tale-ish. Our concept of angels is a long story. It goes back to Roman art, basically. When the Christians were invited out of the catacombs, they adopted a lot of Roman art to convey Christian concepts. And there was these carriers of the souls, Noki, who were on the tombs of Romans, and they looked like little boys with winged birds. And that became the artistic representation of this concept of angels. But the biblical text is very different in its description. And then that led us to a whole, down kind of a interesting path of how increasingly we started to see angels in this way. So the angels of God use these vehicles in the Bible, but so do the bad guys. So the idea is that this is first and foremost the manifestation of the world of angels and God in the midst of the heavens. I mean, you put Jesus on the shores of Galilee, with some fishermen in a boat. Everyone's like, yeah, that's great. We can believe that. That's God himself. He's come to Galilee. But you suddenly put him in the midst of the heavens, surrounded by these vehicles and they're angelic, and suddenly everyone's like, no, 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 no. God's too big for that. It's like, okay, he wasn't too big for the Sea of Galilee and the fishermen and Peter's boat, but he's, so it's just a prejudice of putting God in a box. But I'm following the evidence. And so first of all, this is a war, and both sides have it. Now, how do you discern what's demonic and what's, godly? That now requires further lenses. So the modus operandi, for instance, alien abductions, where you go, what's all that about? I mean, the good guys, what would they abduct people? And what do they create? Hybrids. That's the heart of it. It's strange as it may be, but that's what Dr. Jacobs from Philadelphia, Temple University in Philadelphia, and other people like him, Bob Hopkins, the head of psychiatry from Harvard Medical School, John Mack. He shocked the academic world in 1993 when he published a book called Abductions, because he set out to disprove this phenomenon of abductions as being nothing more than a modern psychological disorder akin to demon possession from the Middle Ages. And then he shocked the academic world in 1993, writing a book called Abductions, where he said, no, it was all real. He had this way of discerning whether these stories were true or not, and that it would take too long for him to take people through it. But as the head of psychiatry in Harvard's medical school, he said, no, this is real. And from then on, he became a UFO researcher focusing on these abductions. So you go, well, what's the purpose of abductions? To create hybrids. You go, well, where have I seen that before? Now, in the Bible, the origin of the hybrids goes back to the fallen angels. That's what Christians would call them, even though it's a term that doesn't exist anywhere in the Bible. It's a term of Christian culture. In the Bible, they're called the sons of God, the B'nai HaElohim. And they create the Nephilim, which are, this is a concept, the image bearers of God. The children of Adam and Eve are then infused with the image of these fallen angels who wish to create bloodlines for themselves for all kinds of reasons. And so this leads to the concept of the demigods and to Hercules, and it makes it into the religions that they create, these foundational stories that have historical root. They now get transferred into the tale of the religions that they initiate among the nations. They govern, they give knowledge, And so the same way that, apparently God chooses Jacob to become the vehicle for his oracles and prophets, so do the nations fall into the hands of these beings who convey their codes of civilization. And so the world begins to take shape as a result of the interaction of humans and angels, if you wish. And because from the beginning, we were of the world of these beings, and our tale has always, so this is not a new phenomenon. So you go, okay, wait, abductions and hybrids, that falls within the category of the bad guys. Okay, so now that gives you a lens of discernment. We're told if you meet one, test them. If they believe, in the deity of Jesus and in his lordship, then they're the good guys. If they can't confess that, they're the bad guys. So there's an allegiance to the king, and so these are lenses. So I don't cover the whole thing with one sheet and say, oh, they are demonic. I know a lot of Christians do that because they don't understand this word Elohim, which is a term in the Bible that refers to the good angels and the bad angels, and they are both holders of these vehicles, Rechev Elohim.
Am I right, Ali, in thinking that the word Elohim in Hebrew has been translated in the past as Lord?
Gods. It's been translated as gods.
Gods.
And as God himself.
Yeah.
These are the two translations. Lord is usually the translation of Adonai or Yahweh, the name of God in Hebrew, the way that he reveals to Moses at Sinai. So it's been translated, it's a plural term, and it's been translated both to mean the God of Israel, the one God, the one outside of time and space, the creator of them all, and the gods of the nations, like the gods of Egypt, the gods of Rome, etc. So, like, for instance, right now, the Passover is coming, and in the Passover passage is read the story of God coming, and it says that God came and he judged the gods of Egypt. And so it'll say that he judged the Elohim Mitzrayim, the gods of Egypt. Right. And so this particular deity, the God of Israel, is mentioned as being the God of gods, El Ha-Elohim, and the Lord of lords, Adon Ha-Adonim. So he's presented in conjunction to these beings, but why is it plural? The idea is that this particular term captures the attribute of God that would translate into authority, that he's the authority of all the layers of authority that exist. There are many layers of authority. There's authority within a family. There's authorities within this, cosmic order. And these beings, the gods of the nations, have authority. That's why apparently Satan says to Jesus, a dominion has been given to me over all the kingdoms of the world, and I'll give them to whomever I will. These were the gods of Rome. And so the gospel and the Holy Spirit going out apparently decimates their authority as the Romans pledge allegiance to the King of Kings. The spiritual authority falls. But the idea is that these are layers of authority, and then it's plural, even when it refers to the one God, Elohim, because he is the authority of all the layers of authority. Within him rests the plurality of angelic authority. So it's been translated as God or the gods.
Okay. You have very eloquently set forth a whole worldview, a whole cosmic worldview, in terms of how the UFO phenomena fits in with ancient mythology, with religious experience, right up to date. What is the sort of experience you've had with other members of, shall we say, the UFO community around this idea? Because it's quite an original idea, if I may say, Ali.
Yeah, it was very original. That's why I think the documentary went viral. I was one of the first people in the world to present this, but since 2006, when it came out until now, I've seen an explosion of scholars independently coming up with the same ideas. So I see that this was a revelation. Why? Because I think that we're being prepared for the battle at the end of this age, because it is a war of angels, and these guys are here, and they are giving technology. I mean, the leap forward from riding on horses and chariots just, in my grandmother's time to now, reaching for the moon and beyond, the leap that we have made technologically in the industrial age since, the steam engine, until now is phenomenal in speed. And when you go back to ancient civilization and to the libraries of Mesopotamia, where civilization came from, there too, archaeologists were surprised at the suddenness of the appearance of civilization and how advanced it was. And when they looked into the libraries of Mesopotamia to read the explanation for the origin of this knowledge, it said the gods. That's who gave it to them. Until Gordon Childe, who was an atheist and a student of Stalin, in the 1930s, he came up with the idea that, of course, these are mythological beings. That's not the explanation. He came up with what's called the Neolithic Revolution, that one of the hunter-gatherers had a coup de génie and came up with farming. And this allowed people to sit around a bonfire, not run for their food, and talk. And that's how they came up with architecture and advanced mathematics to build ziggurats and all of that. He created an atheist explanation, a naturalistic one that didn't involve the testimony of our collective ancestors. You know, the Indians, the Chinese, the Mesopotamians, the Egyptians, the Romans, the Greeks, the Persians, the Jews, even Muhammad, who says he received some sort of a code that became the basis of the Islamic civilization. I mean, try to start a religion, see how far you get with it. There is power. Something has come. All the civilizations but he pushed all of this aside and said, no, this is all mythology. It all came from some hunter-gatherer who had a coup de génie and came up with farming and allowed us to think it through. And then he infused it with Marxism's idea that religion is the opium of the people and a way of controlling social class. And the only thing that in Western culture could not be diminished into the realm of mythology was some of the basic attributes of the biblical text. The angels and all that stuff were pushed into the world of the supernatural, the fairy tale, whatever. But at least the central characters, God, Jesus, these guys, they couldn't be taken down because enough people believed in them. But it kind of gave us a diminished understanding of our origins, and the biblical text brought up. So first, I have to say there's been massive explosion of this way of thinking over the past 25 years. And more people in the culture are intrigued, by seeing it this way. The UFO community as a whole, I would say that has fallen under the spell of these beings, the way that one would have fallen under the spell of the ancient gods. If these are fallen angels, they're powerful. And so, for instance, when I first started researching the abduction phenomenon, it was seen widely negative by most abductees. But then I noticed that actually they divided into three categories over time. One group called itself the contactees. They felt they were blessed, that someone was, anointing them with some knowledge for the humanity to save us in this age. And then another group called itself the experiencers. They took a neutral stance. It was neither bad nor good. They were just having an experience. So now we start to see three categories. So the UFO religion is something that's been expanding since the 1950s. If you look at the movie called The Day the Earth Stood Still, which came out, I think, in 51 or 52, somewhere around there, it is a message that says, we've come to civilize you so that you don't bring your warlike ways and nuclear bombs into the Galactic Federation. And it's interesting that early on, even earlier than that, in the 40s, I'm reading, advisors to the U.S. government saying this is why these guys are here. And so I see that from the beginning, they seeded before any research was ever done, because it was so new. I mean, this phenomenon started in 1947. They seeded the human culture with a benevolent view of themselves as the saviors of the human race. And that's why I felt, wow, they're competing with, the savior. Mm-hmm. So they're positioning themselves as the pseudo-messianic figures of our age. Why? To rally the nations against the King of Kings. And so this is the battle of angels. This is the climax of history. And this is coming out. So yes, there's a group of our society, and Chinese, like in China, and UFO societies have millions of adherents. They've already fallen, they've fallen under the influence of these guys. The fallen angels essentially are reinventing themselves as the benevolent, spiritually advanced, scientifically advanced saviors of the modern world. And only the biblical lens can give you the discernment to understand how to divide the wheat from the chaff, so to speak.
It sounds, Ali, like, because you mentioned the infamous text, Chariots of the Gods from the late 60s, Eric van Däniken, which did an awful lot to undermine Christianity and well, aspects of people's faith in the late 60s and early 70s, because it was sort of the beginning of that whole UFO religion, as you say, but also subtly undermining the Bible in all sorts of ways and putting it through a UFO lens. It seems to me you've gone in reverse. You have taken the cultural obsession with this type of thing and put it through a biblical lens. Is that a fair summation of what you're doing and your work?
Well, sure, but only because that's where the evidence took me. The ancient astronaut theorists like von Däniken, yes, they suddenly make the Bible into the work of aliens. They bring the Darwinian perspective and they say these are all aliens. And of course, that undermines the biblical narrative. Now we know our ancestors were so stupid and they turned them into gods and angels and God, but because they're primitive. Now we're so advanced, we're so scientific, so evolved, we don't have the same passions or delusions. We don't carry their genes, or we've now been civilized. We're the civilized monkeys because we live on the other side of the discovery of electricity and penicillin and all that stuff. And so we now know that in fact there are aliens out there because we have Galileo's telescope to tell us this. And now we know what our ancestors saw. Oh, okay, the mystery has been solved. But that's interesting. But that's the idea of one man or a bunch of men. Thank you, Mr. von Däniken. I mean, I love Swiss chocolate, but then I'm sure lots of great things have come from Swiss, and I'm sure the Swiss are very punctual people. But the universe is a place of mysteries, and we don't even know where the universe is because we don't have a larger context to explain it. So we don't even know where we are. That's how little we know. So for me to say, okay, that's an interesting lens, I'm willing to consider it, and I want to know the building blocks of it and test it. And then, but this lens, what do I find in this lens? Well, I find, first of all, that the archaeology of these ancient cities matched. There really was, most of the cities of the Bible, even the ones that were created right after the flood, were all been discovered. The movement of history and the rise and fall of empires has proceeded exactly the way the prophetic lens mentioned it in antiquity, all the way to the destruction of the Second Temple, even in the ingathering of the Jewish people. So the prophecy has, the history has, the spiritual experience that we have when we come to this. We're not delusional. We're not just believing some small thing that our daddy and mommy told us to believe in. We're good boys and girls, and that kind of a traditional faith. We have profound spiritual experiences where we, meet the living God in our souls. We understand what's going on. So there's a lot of credibility. And I go, okay, so I got this magnificent book and tradition and how it all ties together, the gods of the world over the nations, the coming of the Spirit, the collapsing of these things, the continued presence of these beings as described in narrative here. I got all of this on one side as a body of evidence. And on the other side, I have Mr. von Däniken's own thinking in his, apartment or wherever he lived. I have to put this in a scale and weigh it. Yeah. And so it's interesting. It's an interesting idea, but I'm not even sure Darwin's hypothesis was completely accurate for me to transfer it into the galaxies and say, yes, we evolved here. They evolved elsewhere. They're coming here for what reason? Well, now Zacharias Sitchin will give us his fairy tale of why they're coming here. And I can go with Sitchin's mind. I've spoken with him on the phone. Or I can go with the Book of Books.
Absolutely.
And so that's one way to look at it.
Yeah, I mean, would you?
If that answers your question. The undermining the Bible. And did I put it through no? It's just the evidence weighed in this direction. The pieces of the puzzle fell completely into place, and therefore I felt compelled to share this with people, so that they, as thinking people, would consider it for themselves, not and maybe would inform me and teach me something about it. But I felt I'd found something important enough, the way the dots connected, that my fellow human beings and thinking people around me needed to consider it in their own great spiritual search in this mystery we all share.
Absolutely. It's interesting the way that you framed that answer, Ali. It's very fascinating that Eric van Daniken and his ideas were Darwinian in essence, but I also think there was probably a large dollop of H.P. Lovecraft, a little bit of fictional thinking around that as well. But that's for another day, another discussion. Unfortunately, we are coming to the end of our fascinating conversation, which I've enjoyed thoroughly meeting you and hearing your thesis around this. It's fascinating, born out of experience, but you've managed to create something which is very thought-provoking. I'd just like to take you back, though, to that night in Iran and what you experienced and what you saw. With all your researches, Ali, with all your time and meditation upon this mystery that is amongst us, what do you think you saw that night in essence? Did you see something that was of the dark side or something that was maybe of the light side, or is it?
I think the dark side, because they live in the ground, and that's where they live. I mean, Hades. There's a lot of stuff in the ground apparently, and but I'll tell you why. Over the years, as I meditated on that incident, it always, in my spirit, took me to Daniel chapter 10 from the scroll of the prophet Daniel, where it talks about the prince of Persia. Daniel goes to pray about a matter, and he fasts from, I don't know what he fasts from, I think sugar and wine. And it takes 21 days for the answer to come. And the angel that brings him the answer says, you're a beloved of God. God will answer you immediately. But it took 21 days to get to you because the prince of Persia withstood me for 21 days. And I had to call Michael, your prince, to come and fight him. And after, I'm going to fight the prince of Greece. Meaning that behind the nations, there are these powers and principalities. Behind the empires. This is what I mean. It translates into the polytheistic religions, which were real beings. The sorcerers of Egypt matched the miracles of Moses until they ran out of steam. But then, the serpent of Moses eats their serpents, telling the end from the beginning. And so the prince of Persia, I thought to myself, how long has this power been behind the Persian Empire? And seeing this, and I thought, could it be that this is actually what it looks like? Who knows what these things look like? I've never been inside of one. I don't want to reduce it to sci-fi. It's not, Captain Kirk. I don't know what it is. Who knows how this thing works? I don't want to reduce the creation to 20th century science. But I thought, if there was anything in the Bible that ever relates to a power behind the Persians, it's the Prince of Persia, and its realm is the boundaries of it are as large as the Persian Empire. And so I find it interesting that once again, I mean, not once again, because in the ancient times, Persia, even though it wrestled, with the Jews, but it ultimately favored the Jews of all the empires and ordered the building of the temple in Jerusalem and the walls of Jerusalem and the killing of the last of the Amalekites, Haman. But in modern time, under its Islamic rendition, since the revolution of 79, it has shifted to become a nemesis of Israel and of Jerusalem, with the understanding that the erasing of Israel off the face of the earth will bring about the Mahdi, the 12th Imam. That's the foreign policy of the Islamic Republic towards Israel. It's based on an eschatological understanding of how all of this is going to play out through the Shia lens. And it involves the summoning of the Islamic Messiah and the Mahdi. And it happens when the Islamic community is pure enough and strong enough to break the backbone of the Zionists and free Jerusalem from the Jews. And so this power, I wonder, since Iran was very much behind this war, whether it has come back to life at the end of the age,
Right.
And whether this battle even that was mentioned in this book of Daniel was talking about our time. Right. So that's the only thing that's come to my mind is the scroll of Daniel.
Interesting. Fascinating, Ali, absolutely fascinating. Tell people where they can find out more about you and your ministry.
Yes, you can go to my website, thinkagainproductions.com. You'll see my documentary on the front page. It's free. You can watch it. If you feel like, wow, I really love this, you can press on a donate button, leave a donation. If you double click on the documentary, it'll take you into my YouTube page, and you can subscribe to that. And stay tuned, in kind of, in my ecosystem, because right now I'm undergoing a major change when it comes to digital identity, and I'm launching, a much more robust educational website. But for now, if you want more education beyond what's on the YouTube channel, on the website, you'll see a link to my Patreon account, and you can follow me there, where I have audio series that you can listen to. thinkagainproductions.com.
And you've definitely made me think again. Ali, thank you so much for coming on All Things Visible and Invisible.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of Things Visible and Invisible. We're dedicated to uncovering phenomena that challenge our understanding of reality, from ancient enigmas and paranormal encounters to scientific anomalies and forgotten histories. If you enjoyed this journey into the mysterious and unexplained, please consider subscribing to our channel and hitting the notification bell to stay updated on future explorations. Have a personal experience or story that aligns with our investigations? We'd love to hear from you. Visit our website at tvi.show and reach out through our contact form. While we can't feature every submission, we review them all, and your story might be featured in an upcoming episode. To support our continued investigations, please consider becoming a Patreon supporter or channel member. Your contributions make these explorations possible and give you access to exclusive content, early releases, and monthly behind-the-scenes discussions with our team. Don't forget to check out our merch store. We've got everything from TVI-branded t-shirts and hoodies to stickers and coffee mugs, perfect for showing your support while keeping the mysteries close. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time as we continue to explore the things visible and invisible.